All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive.
It's great to be here.
Today we're looking at a really interesting report
Yes, we are.
from the European Banking Authority, or the EBA.
Right, the EBA.
And it's their final report on anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing, or AML CFT.
Oh, AML CFT efforts across the EU.
Yeah, exactly, before the new authority, AMLA, takes over.
Yeah.
So, kind of a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. This is the last time the EBA is going to be doing this.
Yeah, so we're going to dig into the EBA report and look at some of the key findings and talk about what it might mean for the future of AML CFT in the EU.
Sounds good.
Cool. So, I mean, one of the first things that jumped out at me was that it seems like a lot of EU countries have actually made some pretty good progress in this area.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Like they've been stepping up their game.
Yeah, they've been making some serious improvements in their AML CFT frameworks, for sure.
So what are some of the specific things that you're seeing in the report that really stand out as positive developments?
Well, one of the things that we're seeing is this kind of growing awareness of the strategic importance of AML CFT.
Okay.
So, like, in the past,
Yeah.
a lot of countries, they kind of treated it as a compliance exercise, you know, just like checking boxes.
Right.
But now we're seeing them approach it from a more strategic perspective.
Gotcha.
You know, they're really starting to understand that AML CFT is not just about complying with regulations.
Yeah.
It's actually about protecting their financial system.
Protecting their economies.
Exactly, and their citizens from the harmful effects of financial crime.
And from these increasingly sophisticated criminal networks.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's not just, small-time stuff anymore.
It's like big money.
It's a whole global network thing.
Global networks.
Yeah.
You know, highly organized.
So it's good to see that countries are taking this more seriously.
It is. It's definitely encouraging.
Now, are there specific examples in the report of countries that are doing a really good job, or are they just kind of lumping everybody together?
Well, they do highlight some specific examples of good practices,
Okay.
but they don't, like, name and shame
Right.
specific countries.
Right. That wouldn't go over very well.
No, it wouldn't.
So what are some of the things that they're highlighting as good practices?
Well, one thing that they're really emphasizing is the importance of having dedicated AML CFT units
Okay.
within the competent authorities.
So specialized teams that are just focused on this.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, you need people who have the expertise
Yeah.
and the resources to really focus on this issue.
All right. So dedicated units, what else are they pointing to?
Well, another thing that they're highlighting is the importance of information sharing,
Okay.
both domestically and internationally.
So between countries, but also within a country, different agencies are talking to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes
You
sense.
know, you need to break down those silos and make sure that everyone has access to the information they need.
So more communication and coordination.
Exactly.
And the report's saying that we're seeing more of that happening.
We are seeing more of that happening.
That's good.
It's definitely a step in the right direction.
Okay, so that's the good news.
Yeah, the good news.
But, it's not all sunshine and roses.
It's not, no.
The report also flags some pretty serious concerns, right?
It does, yes.
So what are some of the big ones that jumped out at you?
Well, I think one of the biggest concerns that the report highlights is the issue of inconsistency.
Inconsistency.
Yes.
Inconsistency in what way?
Well, in a couple of different ways.
Right.
First of all, there's inconsistency in terms of the information that countries are using
Okay, go.
to assess their AML CFT risks.
So some countries are using old data.
Some countries are using outdated information, yeah.
Okay.
Some countries are using different methodologies.
Gotcha.
And so it's very difficult to get a clear picture.
Yeah, to compare apples to apples.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Of the overall risk landscape across the EU.
That makes it really hard to know where the weakest links are.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so inconsistency in the information they're using to assess risk. What else?
Well, there's also inconsistency in terms of the way that countries are implementing the AML CFT rules.
Okay.
So some countries are taking a very strict approach.
Uh-huh.
Some countries are taking a more lenient approach.
Gotcha.
And so again, it creates this uneven playing field,
Yeah.
which can be exploited by criminals.
Yeah, because they're going to go to the places where it's easier, right?
Exactly. They're going to go to the weakest link.
Okay, so inconsistency in how they're assessing risk, inconsistency in how they're implementing the rules.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, and then there's the whole issue of cryptocurrency,
Oh, yeah, Krupa.
which the report specifically calls out.
I was going to ask you about that because, this is something we've talked about before.
It's a huge challenge
Yeah.
for AML CFT efforts.
This is like the Wild West out there.
It's like the Wild West.
Yeah. And it's growing so rapidly.
And it's evolving so quickly.
So why is crypto such a big challenge for AML CFT?
Well, I mean, I think that the main reason is just the decentralized nature of cryptocurrency.
Okay.
There's no central authority that's controlling it.
It's peer-to-peer.
It's peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult
Yeah.
to track the flow of funds.
It's very difficult to know who's doing what and where the money's going.
Exactly. And that makes it very easy for criminals to launder money.
Right, to move money around without being detected.
And to finance terrorism.
Yeah, so the report is saying that this is a major area of concern.
It is a major area of concern.
And that countries are really struggling with how to address it.
They are.
Because it's so new.
It's so new and it's so different.
Yeah, and the technology is changing so fast
Exactly.
that it's hard to keep up with.
It's hard to keep up, and the regulations are lagging behind.
Yeah, always lagging behind.
Yeah.
The technology,
The criminals are always one step ahead,
always one step ahead.
it seems like.
Yeah, well, they don't have to wait for anybody to make decisions, right? They
Exactly.
just do whatever they want.
They just innovate.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got inconsistency as a big issue.
Yes.
We've got the challenge of cryptocurrency.
Yes.
What else is in this report that we should be talking about?
Well, another big one is enforcement.
Enforcement.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Well, the report found that in a lot of cases, the penalties for AML CFT violations are not strong enough
They're not strong enough.
to deter criminal activity.
So basically a slap on the wrist.
A slap on the wrist.
And they just go back and do it again.
Exactly.
Because it's worth the risk.
It's a cost of doing business.
Right, exactly.
And there's also a lack of consistency.
Oh, there's that word again.
Yeah, inconsistency keeps coming up.
In how those penalties are being applied.
Exactly.
So even if the penalties on the books were strong enough, the fact that they're not being applied consistently is a problem?
It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
Because, again, it creates this uneven playing field, and it undermines the credibility of the whole AML CFT system.
Right. If criminals think that they can get away with it in some countries but not others, they're going to go to the countries where they think they can get away with it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So enforcement is a big deal.
Enforcement is a big deal.
Anything else on enforcement, or should we move on?
I think the other thing to mention on enforcement is that the report also found weaknesses.
Okay.
In the way that enforcement actions are being documented and reported.
So basically they're not keeping good records.
Well, they're not keeping consistent records.
Okay.
Or they're not reporting them in a way that allows for effective monitoring and analysis.
So it's hard to see what's working and what's not.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so it's difficult to learn from past experiences.
Yeah, to improve the system.
And to hold people accountable for their actions.
Okay, so enforcement, documentation, all kind of connected.
All connected, yeah.
All right, anything else before we move on to the really big elephant in the room?
I think that there's one more point that we should touch on,
Okay.
which is the issue of cooperation.
Cooperation?
Yes.
So who's not cooperating with who?
Well, the report found that there are challenges with cooperation, both between different countries and between different authorities within the same country.
So we talked about that a little bit before.
Right.
Different agencies within a country.
Exactly.
Not always on the same page.
Not always on the same page.
Yeah.
And that can create blind spots.
Yeah.
That criminals can exploit.
Right, they slip through the cracks.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so cooperation is an issue.
Cooperation's a big issue.
So it seems like there's a lot of work to be done.
There's a lot of work to be done.
But I mean, the timing of this report is interesting, right?
It is very interesting.
Because it's coming out just as AMLA is about to take over.
Exactly.
So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a good thing that AMLA is coming in at this time, because I think it's clear from the report that there's a need for a more centralized and a more consistent approach to AML CFT supervision across the EU.
Right. Because right now it's kind of a patchwork.
It's a patchwork.
Yeah. Of different countries doing their own thing.
Exactly.
And they're not always talking to each other.
And they're not always on the same page.
And there are these gaps.
Gaps and inconsistencies.
So AMLA is supposed to come in and kind of smooth all that out.
That's the hope.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you're going to be looking for from AMLA?
Well, I think one of the key things is going to be to see how they address these inconsistencies.
The inconsistencies.
That the report has identified.
So are they going to come up with like a standardized way of assessing risk for every country?
Are they going to harmonize the way that the rules are implemented? Are they going to strengthen the penalties?
Right.
And make sure that they're applied consistently?
And improve the documentation and reporting
And improve the documentation and reporting.
So basically kind of get everybody on the same page.
Exactly.
And make sure that everybody's playing by the same rules.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting to watch.
It'll be fascinating to see how they tackle this.
Yeah. I mean, because this is a pretty big shift, right?
It's a huge shift.
Yeah, for the EU.
The EU era.
To have this kind of centralized authority.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, I think that the key takeaway here is that the fight against financial crime is a constantly evolving one.
It is.
And it's one that requires a constant vigilance and adaptation.
So we can't just rest on our laurels.
We can't rest on our laurels.
We got to keep up with the criminals.
You got to stay one step ahead.
Yeah, which is hard.
It is hard.
Yeah, but important.
But it's essential.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really interesting deep dive.
It has been.
Thanks for joining me.
It's been a pleasure.
And for all of you listening out there, I'll leave you with this.
Yeah.
With AMLA stepping into the ring.
Yes.
Do you think we're going to see a knockout punch?
Oh, a knockout punch?
Against financial crime in the EU? Or is it going to be more of a long, slow slog?
Oh, a long, slow slog.
I guess we'll have to wait and see.
We'll have to wait and see. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.